Are y'all ready? Good morning, everyone. We ask for the courtesy of the board members, staff, and those that are participating electronically that you please silence your cell phones. Good morning and welcome to the Orange County School Board's work session, which has been scheduled today for the purpose of discussing school board policy BEDH, public input at school board meetings. The public will not have an opportunity to participate in the work session to provide public comment because this is not a regularly scheduled school board meeting. No action will be taken, and there will be no pre-agenda period in which the public normally addresses the school board on relevant topics that are related to the work of the board. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Board members are attending in person with the exception of Chair Jacobs, who will be absent from this meeting. I want to remind the public that board members will not be engaging in outside electronic or digital communications during the meeting, so we can focus on the meeting itself, giving our attention to the matters immediately before us. Should you want to contact us, please continue to do so before or after each meeting. To my fellow board members and district staff, when speaking, please make sure your microphone is turned on and speak directly into it so our YouTube and Orange TV viewers can hear you clearly. Now for the moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. Now for the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Dr. Vasquez, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This morning, we will be discussing policy BEDH, public input at school board meetings. Deputy Counsel Palmerini will be presenting the information, and then we'll have opportunity for the board to have discussion in relation to this policy. We know that this may be our first crack at this policy. We're hoping to be able to really lay the foundation of those items that you feel passionately about so that we can begin incorporating it. And the goal is to have the revised policy prior to the start of the August 2023 school year.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. Mr. Palmerini.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Good morning, members of the board. Just as we've gone through these hearings that we've had in the last couple months, there's been some discussion about whether or not we need to revise policy BEDH, especially with respect to how it involves our pre-agenda portion of the meeting. So I wanted to just go over, and I wanted to make clear this is a first shot. When I forwarded to you all an email, this is our first shot at this. This is not the final product in any way. This is a discussion point. What we've attempted to do is incorporate some of the comments that we have received from various board members and put them all together, but obviously we are here to workshop this, to get your input on this, and to see if there are any additional changes that you all would like to see us incorporate. And then we would bring that back at a later work session to see if we've gotten it to where we need it to be. And then, of course, once we get it where we need to be, we'll go through the rule development workshop process and the final adoption. So before I get started on the policy itself, there's two things that you're going to see in here with respect to there's what is known as a public input period and a public comment period. You all know this, but just for the purpose of the public who may not, the public input period is the public speakers that come prior in the pre-agenda meeting prior to the start of our regularly scheduled board meeting. Those are the ones where we do not have there's no agenda item that these comments are tethered to. It's just public coming in to comment to you all on subjects that they want to have commented on. And then the public comment period is for those periods during the regularly scheduled school board meeting where the members of the public can comment on agenda items that the board is considering. So most of our changes are going to be focused on the public input period from pre-agenda. And then, there's a couple changes we've made in the public comment period. So Going down here in subsection 1B, and it's, of course, we start our normally scheduled pre-agenda meetings at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we generally start our school board meetings at 4:45. And we typically take 30 minutes of public comment in the pre-agenda portion of the meeting prior to going to the regularly scheduled school board meeting. So the policy says that the public input period shall begin approximately 45 minutes to 1 hour prior to the regularly scheduled board meeting and conclude no later than 30 minutes after commencing, unless otherwise extended by a vote of the board, provided the extended period of time concludes prior to the beginning of the regularly scheduled board meeting. So then we added in language that says, in no event shall the public input period last more than 45 minutes from the time of commencement. So that would give you 45 minutes of comment prior to the start of the 4:45 meeting. That was the intent. And part of the intent behind it, of course, is we have regularly scheduled meetings that start at 4:45. A lot of times, as you all have seen the last few meetings, we've had a lot of students in here and other folks being recognized, and we wanted to make sure that we got to those folks timely. So we didn't want the public input period to extend to the point we were making those folks have to wait an extended period of time. That was the intent behind it. So, and then we changed this language, was the next set of red line language was in there already, but we moved it up to a different section, to this section, because we thought it was more appropriate here. Because there's a time limit on the public input period prior to pre-agenda meeting, members of the public who wish to speak may not all have an opportunity to do so. So there may be, we have so many speakers that we say we can't get to them all. And you will see later on in the policy that we have sort of codified what we've been doing informally about how many minutes each speaker gets depending on the number of speakers we have. But that was, we still wanted to say, there could be a time where we have 60, 80 pre-agenda speakers, and you won't be able to get to all of those folks if you want the regular business meeting to get started on time. So we wanted to have that option available. All right, signing up to speak during the public input period. So what you're going to see here, this is a replication of language that we had previously in our board policy, and I think the last time we had it in there was 2015. At least one of you on the board suggested that maybe we have something like this. And what it says is, any person or groups desiring to address the board shall submit a written request through an electronic or written method designated by the superintendent or designee. And we had in there not later than 11 days prior to the meeting, at which consideration is desired, requesting to speak at the pre-agenda public input period portion of the meeting. This is back in, I think when Member Gould was first on the board, we had something like this, where if folks wanted to sign up at pre-agenda, they used to get 5 minutes and they would have to tell us, hey, we're coming to speak, and it had 11 days in that policy in the past. So the order of speakers will be based on the order of receipt of electronic or written request. We don't have an electronic system yet, but if we have one, we're going to, it would be when they sign up through the electronic system. And then we had in there, such request to speak shall contain the following: name, address, and email address of the person making request. Now, in the past, we have gotten into whether or not we can require an address of people who speak. You see cited in that big long comment there on the right-hand side is case law from the 3rd DCA, which says we absolutely can require that addresses be provided. One of the reasons, moreover, at public hearings involving local government matters such as budgeting, taxation, zoning, law enforcement, local regulations, elected officials and members of the public have legitimate interest in knowing whether a speaker is a resident who will be impacted by the government regulation, if I can, action at issue. Finally, most public meetings do not offer the opportunity for governmental misuse of enforcement priorities that concern the trial court when it was issued. So basically, the court said, you all have the right to know if the people coming to speak to you are actually going to be impacted by what is occurring here, and for us to do that, we can in fact collect addresses. So we're also saying that we're going to have a notation as to whether the speaker is a parent/legal guardian of the student, employee or resident of Orange County, or non-resident of Orange County, again, knowing who is speaking to you. the organization or group represented, if any, content of the information to be presented, and a copy of any written materials to be distributed. Sometimes we have speakers who come up here and distribute materials, and we don't have an opportunity to look at them prior to. So there's sometimes where what's in the written materials, we would want to have the ability, as the staff would want to have the ability to address those written materials. Specific questions to be asked or specific action desired of the board. Now, this is from the old language. Some of you all may not be thrilled with specific questions to be asked in the public agenda period, so I would suspect we'll have some discussion around that, but I wanted to include we wanted to include the language that was previously in the policy. The board chair may require a written affidavit or taking of an oath at the pre-agenda meeting concerning any charges or information to be presented against an individual that may be considered derogatory or of a serious nature. So if somebody was going to come in here and they were going to address a specific employee and accuse that specific employee of misconduct, especially if we see from the nature of the issue that they're going to address, I'll just use an example. I think teacher Smith at such and such elementary school needs to be fired because they abuse children. That would be a very scurrilous allegation to make, and we would want to ensure that the chair had the opportunity to put that person, basically to submit a written affidavit or put that person under oath if they're going to make that kind of allegation against an employee. So that's the purpose of that language there. And the board may waive the requirements in this section by consensus. So, Madam Chair, I don't know if you would want me to go through the whole policy all the way, or do you want to stop at each section and ask questions?
I think we can stop here and take some questions. The board's kind of lit up. Member Dr. Kester-Dental.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Palmerini, for going through all this information. At this point, I have a question about what you just spoke about, when someone comes to say something derogatory. So the chair can swear them in, which means that what they are saying is true. And if it's still not true, what's the consequence if they've already been sworn in?
If they are sworn, so the chair could swear them in and say the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And the consequence is, if you don't tell the truth, there could be potential for us to refer the issue out. You know, making a false statement in a public proceeding could potentially be criminal activity. So there's that avenue of sending it over to the state attorney saying, hey, this statement was made, it was clearly not true, and let them decide whether they were going to take any action. The board could also make a determination that, hey, this person, what they said was not true, and while you can't cut off a person's right to speak altogether, there could be like, hey, maybe next meeting you're not speaking in the pre-agenda period. It would have to be some sort of penalty like that, not a permanent ban on speaking, but there could be a penalty for giving false testimony in front of this board.
Can we make that just standard protocol where we swear everyone in before they speak? Just kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. But can we don't always know when someone comes to the mic that they're going to make a derogatory or an accusation or something. So is there a place on the sign-up card or the speaker card where they give more information?
So what we're going to, if you look here on subsection 4 that we just went over, content of the information to be presented and a copy of any written materials to be distributed, we would put that on the card to say what, and we would have them fill out electronically if we go to an electronic system. This is the subject that I intend on speaking about, and we would have them give, as I would envision it, some detail. That's the way it used to be when we had this in the past. There would be some detailed explanation as to what they were going to speak about. So I would think that would be the place where the speaker would tell us, hey, I'm coming to speak about teacher Smith at X Elementary, who I think is not taking care of children or abused children. It's just as an example.
I'm just thinking about the process up here when there's a speaker card. The attorney knows, our general counsel knows, but then the chair doesn't always know what they're going to say. Is it a time when you could weigh in and say, I mean, I know this doesn't happen often, but I'm just wondering how that process actually works in real time.
I can answer that from the electronic, Madam Chair. It's okay if I answer? Okay. So the electronic system that we're potentially looking at would actually come up so you guys could see who was coming up next. And we could even say, Jay Smith is up next and have some sort of display. We could add the topic as well there. But I will tell you, a lot of the cards that I see that are handwritten, number one, I can't read them. And number two, what they put on the card is not necessarily what they end up speaking about. So there are some challenges.
Okay, can I follow up? So thank you for the clarification. Just in looking at you, I lost my train of thought. So when someone is at the mic and they're saying someone's name, who's a staff member or an employee, that's when we say, I mean, if we hear someone who starts to go that direction, the chair can say that's enough. We don't use any particular employee's name. Or I guess you can't just say the principal at this school. Would that also identify a person?
That would.
Okay, so it's up to the chair to then say, remind them we don't use names. However, I have a different opinion about electeds, but our staff members, I think, should be protected. So I guess that's the opportunity when the chair would intervene.
Right.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Castor-Dental. Member Gould, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Pomerini. We haven't really used the 11 days in a long time. Why is it back?
Because I was utilizing the language from the past. This is the starting of a discussion point. I am not in any way wedded to the 11 days.
Okay, I don't want 11 days. I don't even want 11 minutes. If I want to speak, I want to be able to do that. So I would not be in favor of instituting anything in advance like that. We have the opportunity for them to submit it 11 days maybe in advance, but not make it a requirement that they have to get it in 11 days because too much happens in the world too fast. The advanced material review, the way that was put to, I think if you come with something, and as long as we have a protocol that it's not handed to us individually and it's handed to either, our general counsel that's down below working that meeting or staff, because most of the time the material is really quite informational, and it's only rarely, in my experience, been something that's derogatory, and then I put it aside till later anyway to really review. So the word specific in the topics also concerns me. When people hear things that may have been the intent that they were going to come, and I don't know how many times we've heard that. I intended to come and talk about X, but I was so moved by what happened here now, I want to comment on Y. So I think a general topic is fine, but, what are we going to do if they don't stick to the specific language? So I just don't see a huge purpose in that. I also, and I think we'll get to this later, but I would like us to consider leaving the ability to sign up to speak till the end of the comment period, because we already have a certain time. So if the list is too long, they can't do it. But we kind of set this false thing, and as traffic gets worse in our community, or as people are in here and really want to speak on a topic that they are now moved to speak on, I would like to have them have that ability if we have the bandwidth in the certain period. So I would like us to consider that. And that's all of my comments right now.
Thank you, Member Gould. Member Felder.
Good morning, and thank you for your work, Mr. Palmerini. Most of my concerns sort of have been addressed, but I do have a concern about the ability of the constituents to really express their concerns. I know sometimes if the topics are controversial, it's going to be long. But this is my take. We were elected to serve the communities in which we live. And a part of our dossier, or part of our promise, is that we would be their voice. They can't sit up here because they didn't run for the position. We did. So we have to, as best as possible, be able to allow them to communicate their concerns. However, I'm not in favor of anyone specifically labeling teachers, administrators, that kind of stuff. I don't care what kind of oath we give them. I just think I don't like that. I guess because I was in the position. And unless we got time to evaluate and determine whether or not it's truth, and we don't have that kind of time, not really. But I think, again, also, if there is an opportunity for us to determine that what they're saying is truth, I guess we would have to have seemingly like not necessarily a plethora of witnesses, but some number of witnesses to say the same thing. And maybe we've gotten emails and it's been proven, and we can say that. But I just think when people arbitrarily tells us stuff and then it's not true, I've been put in that predicament, and my go-to person is Dr. Bridget Williams, and then when I get Dr. Vasquez, because they will come to us and they have that right. But a lot of times, board members, we don't get the whole story. We don't. Well, maybe it's just me, but we don't get the whole story. So I'm concerned that we need to be able to do that. But at the same token, I want people to feel like they have the right to come in and express their concerns. So about this time thing, now, are we able to make an adjustment? Because I like one time we had a whole lot of speakers and we dropped the time down from 3 to 2 because we wanted everybody, but we still didn't have everybody. Like Member Gould was saying, sometimes traffic stops people, they can't get here fast enough, and they have some real concerns we need to hear. So can we make the adjustments to that? Or are we just talking about what we might make adjustments to?
I think you're doing a little bit of both. The next section that you're going to see down is going to go into time limits depending on the number of
Okay.
speakers we have. So that's one adjustment. Then the other adjustment is how long is the pre-agenda public comment period itself, right? So you can have it, right now we start at 4 o'clock. We run out of we do 30 minutes worth of comment. And remember, we also still have in the pre-agenda period any changes to the agenda that the superintendent has to announce as well. So we can run that thing up to our advertised starting time of 4:45 and then go ahead and start the meeting. Now, generally, we'll take 5 minutes. If the public input period goes to 4:40, we'll take 5 to 10 minutes before we actually agenda in. So in the first section of the policy, it says it'll last no longer than 45. I don't know, let me scroll up. Oh, well, that was just too quick. Oh, stop it. Sorry.
But I remember reading you.
Yeah, so at that, it says it'll last no longer than 45 minutes from commencement. So if you start at 4 o'clock, then you're ending at 4:45. So you all can have the discussion that, hey, maybe it lasts no longer than 45 minutes, maybe you want it longer, maybe you want it shorter. That's up to you, but this is just as a discussion point. So there's two things that can determine how long you speak. How long you let each individual speaker speak and how long you're going to let the period go on completely. You may say that we're going to allow all speakers to speak, even
we
if
can do that.
you
We
could
can do
do, yeah, this is completely under your control. You could say, we're going to allow all speakers to speak and say you have 60 of them and each one of them is 1 minute, right? Could you do that under this, and could you say that's what we want to do? Yes.
Okay.
The only thing I'm sorry about that. The only thing I would say is especially on days when we have large amounts of recognitions, that could leave those people who are there for recognitions waiting for a little bit longer as well. So that's just a consideration for you all.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Felder. Okay, I'm up next. So just a few things. I agree with Member Gould about the 11 days or less. Like, I'm fine if it wants to be 11 days and then they have up to the day before to sign in. The materials, I don't mind if they submit it 11 days, but if they want to submit it when they come here, then we need to allow that. I think anytime that we could add flexibility and transparency where we make it as easy as possible on those who wish to speak to the board, that should happen. I agree with, I think it was Member Gould who said that they should be allowed to sign up at any time. Like when you go up to Tallahassee, as long as they're speaking, you can sign up to speak. It doesn't matter. So I think that as long as we're here and we're sitting at this board and there's time allowed, especially for pre-agenda, they should be able to go right up to Mrs. McGill or the Bridget Williams, because that's what we call her, and sign up to speak to the board if they choose to do so. So anytime, again, that we could implement flexibility, that would be great. I think zip codes suffice. I know that we have the ability to address, but if we put in zip codes, that's going to tell us within Orange County they reside. I know all my zip codes, so when people come up and they say, my name is John Smith, and I reside in 32828, I know that that's going to either be my district or a very small portion of Member Salamanca's district. And then let me see what else I had. I would like to, the affidavit, I agree with Member Dr. Castro-Dental. I think it just should be stopped. I think if someone's going to call out an employee, it should just be stopped. I don't think we need an affidavit. I think if they have an issue, what could possibly happen is they could say, I have an issue at my school. At that point, that's going to cue Dr. Vasquez to pull in the area administrator to talk to that person at that time. It does not need to be discussed publicly. If they're not getting what they need from Dr. Vasquez and her team, then they can reach out to the individual board member who covers that area and have that discussion. And then I'm having a little bit of problem. So every time we start the pre-agenda, and I've noticed this more being vice chair, it takes me a good 5 minutes to get through the script. So that's 5 minutes that we're eating into the very precious 45 minutes that we have. So can we like post a video, start at like 3:55 of the chair going through the blurb, and that way she doesn't have to say it every time? We just have a video playing and then we go right into the meeting. That would be helpful because that does take a long time, and I don't care how fast you speak, and I'm a fast speaker. It takes you a few minutes to get through that. And then another point is, can we do the business first? So maybe we do the agenda, we do that business first, and then we go straight into the pre-agenda. The business portion is done, we handle the pre-agenda, and then we go into the the speakers would be the pre-agenda, but then we would go into the regularly scheduled board meeting. And we might want to look at the time of the regularly scheduled board meeting, because I know a lot of people who spoke to us would like us to come later. So maybe that looks like the first Tuesday we meet at 5:30 or 6. The second Tuesday it's earlier. Like we alternate depending, so that everybody has a time and a chance to speak. So I would be in favor of something like that. I would also be in favor, and I know that Member Byrd brought it up before, moving pre-agenda to the end of the meeting. And that way we don't have people waiting to be recognized. You don't have people waiting for us to do all that. We could handle that core business. We could handle our business. And then that gives people who choose to talk to the board outside of what's on the agenda an opportunity for 45 minutes to come talk to the board, and it would allow more time for them to get here if they work. So that would be more accessible to our constituents or our employees who wish to do so, to talk to us to do so. So I'm going to stop there. Mr. Palmerini.
So just a clarifying question, and let me just play a scenario out. Let's say we keep it at the beginning of the meeting, right? And we have 7 speakers who sign up. And we go through that and we finish those 7 speakers and it's 4:30. And then we stop the speakers, and let's say we still have the agenda stuff afterwards. Once we stop the speakers and go into the agenda stuff, would you envision that it's still within 4:45 if somebody came in at like 4:35 and wanted to speak?
No. Once we've gavelled out, once we've closed the pre-agenda meeting, that pre-agenda meeting is over, and we've moved on to the board meeting.
Understood. I just wanted to get clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Member Byrd, you're recognized. Thank you, John.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. All right. So I debated whether or not to even fight this battle again because I brought it up when I first got elected, but I'm going to go ahead and do it because why not, since we're talking about it. I have, and I still do, and I have always felt that our whole pre-agenda and agenda format is confusing, and no one else does it. And so I just am confused about why we do a pre-agenda and why we keep public comment separate if it's agenda items, non-agenda items. I understand the reasoning I've been told, but other school districts do not do it that way. Other government entities don't do it that way. I've often been told by people outside of OCPS, like, they're confused about and every time I even say pre-agenda, like, what is a pre-agenda meeting? Like, there's no understanding of what that is and why we do that. So I'm gonna bring it up again, and I sent out the document that Arabia prepared for me a couple years ago, where she asked school districts all across the state, different large districts and our neighboring districts, how they hold their meetings, if they're broadcast, when they do public comment, and all of them are during their regular meeting, and there are most of them, I believe, I'm looking at them right now, agenda items and non-agenda items are, it looks like, at the same time. But then they talk, also in that document talks about when they do their public comment and during their meeting and so forth. So that's there. That's been shared again this morning for all of you, especially the new board members that maybe not have seen it before, to look at. So with that being said, I agree that the 11 days, we just need to get rid of that, because I also feel that as long as the whatever we decide, our comment period is open, if this meeting is still open and we have room, if people want to sign up to speak, I think they should still be allowed to do that. I'm wondering if maybe for the zip code, because we don't all know everyone's zip codes, if someone can, I don't have a problem with just doing zip codes, but if someone on the staff side can at least vet those zip codes and make sure, because we could all assume that that's a zip code in Orange County and not know all the zip codes in Orange County. So just maybe vet those ahead of time, make sure that those people submitting those zip codes are in Orange County, that would be good. Or change the wording in the policy to say may instead of shall. Where was that? Let me pull it up again.
Right here. Such request to speak shall
Yes, such
contain.
request to speak may contain the following. We could just change that. I don't know, just a thought. And then letter V letter 5 and 6. Go down to that. Specific question to be asked of the board. I don't know if that's necessarily necessary. I don't know how the rest of the board members feel about that. And I agree that the affidavit doesn't need to be there. Okay. And then I agree with the time. I'm a little, I think that we can talk about if it's the board's desire to talk at all about pre-agenda, no pre-agenda, whatever. But I do think that we definitely shouldn't have the time limit for signing up, since it is a challenge for many of our teachers. I hear that often, to get here by 4 o'clock to speak. That would be another reason why I would advocate for not having a pre-agenda meeting, but that's just me. I would like to do it later, just so that we could allow that opportunity for more of our teachers to get there. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Byrd. Member Front, you're recognized.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just a few questions and maybe comments. So I agree with the zip code. I know a couple years ago when I was coming, we were required to state our full address, and I think just with the way things are in the world, it makes more sense to just do zip codes. So maybe we could do a little note thing up here, and then we all have like District 1, and those are the zip codes, District 2, something like that, so we kind of know where they're coming from. And even if they were required to put their address in online, I don't know if there's a way to keep that as not public information.
Unless there is some sort of exemption, i.e. they're related to a police officer, firefighter, then the address would be public.
Okay, so I think just sticking with zip codes, because I think requiring addresses can sometimes be intimidating for some people. They just don't want to, whatever. The 11 days prior, I don't mind it. I mean, when I first read it, I was like, are you kidding me? That sounds ridiculous. But I agree with what you guys are saying, where maybe if we say it's open 11 days prior, but how will we prioritize that? How will the people coming know for certain that they were prioritized correctly in that sense? I know that things get very heated and whatnot, and people will start saying like, I signed up on this day and da da da.
Oh, if electronically, if it comes in, we're going to have a list of when it was received, right?
Okay.
And so, that list would certainly be available to folks who requested, if they were to request it, for example.
I don't
for
know
public
who's requesting,
request.
but
Yeah.
just in case. And then we would prioritize it on like student, parent, or
That goes into the next section, depending on
that's
the
right.
number of
Yes,
speakers we got, yeah.
I do remember reading that. I really love the video idea prior to, it's like being on the airplane. Instead of having I really like the airlines that do the little video and it's kind of fun and whatever. We all know what it's going to say. If you've been here a few times, we all know what you're about to read. And instead of, yes, I think that's great. And we could do that a few minutes prior to the meeting starting. I am 100% with Member Byrd that I think we need to start the meeting. We have a school board meeting. This is when we start. We do we used to say all that at the end of the pre-agenda, like, is there anything we want to change, anything we're removing? We could start off with, I don't know if we need to say any of that kind of stuff. And then we would go right into public comment. However, we'd have to kind of figure out what are we doing with people that we're recognizing. So I don't know, could we do it where we do the recognitions first? We do all of that and then we make the public wait? Or do you make those who are being recognized, we tell them to wait? Because that's the part where if there is only, say we start at 4 still, which I still think that's really early and the teachers cannot come. A lot of people, if you have kids and you're trying to pick them up and whatnot. I don't think any time is going to be the perfect time, but whatever. But if, say we start at 4 o'clock, we do our little thing, it takes 4:05, 4:10. And then if we do the public comment time, and like you said, there's only a few people that come, and now we've told everybody else, show up at 5 or something like that. They would have to come at 4. And then if they wait now 45 minutes, so I don't know, maybe that's something we could discuss on what we want to do. But I do think it's very imperative for the community to know what is happening at these meetings, who all is coming to speak, what is being said. I think it just helps everyone to know there's transparency in that. We can go back and see what was said if we were not here. And then that's all I have. That's it.
Thank you, Member Front. Member Gould.
So I love the idea of doing the pre-agenda within the agenda. So if there's changes to the agenda, we gavel in and look at the changes to the agenda, amend it, and then move on with the meeting. I also love the idea of doing the recognitions first. And one of the reasons I love that idea is that, especially in the last 3 years, we have many people who come assuming they know what we're doing in the schools and have literally no clue what our students and how great they are, or some of our staff are. So it would expose them to some of our stellar representatives that come before us, and then still have time certain public comment. I am concerned about non-agenda items, though, being mixed with agenda items, because the agenda items, when we have something controversial, is unlimited.
Yes.
Right. And we wouldn't want, how would you be able to make sure people who are really speaking on something we're going to vote on that night get the time, especially if it goes long, the meeting goes long. So I still feel like we need a time certain public comment time, that it's whatever it is, 30, 45 minutes, whatever that time is. People can sign up anytime up until the end of that, and then we can go into the presentation and then the agenda items, and not mix and mingle them. Maybe, and actually I heard Angie say this out loud, is instead of just the zip code, we say the zip code in the city or the town or whatever, because I have a lot of different people in 34786, but they are actually Gotha and Dr. Phillips and Horizon West. And then there's little town of Windermere that is really the town of Windermere. So that might be giving us regionality a little bit more specific without getting into specific addresses. And then maybe we used to not meet until 5:30. And I'm not advocating that we go that far again, because I'm not sure how good the quality was at the end of our meetings sometimes then. But maybe we do adjust it by 30 minutes so that it gives people, so that if we are doing recognitions, it gives them that more time to get here, especially if they can sign up electronically or in person till the end of that speaker time. So those are my feedbacks after listening to my great colleagues. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Gould. Okay, I had punched back in. So a couple of things. I agree with Member Gould about maybe the city. If we have the city and the zip code, it doesn't give anything away, and then we know they're A, in Orange County, and B, if they're in our district, or if it's a zip code that we share with another board member. I also, if we're really looking at shaking up how we do this whole agenda, I would be in agreement that we would start our business, and we can flesh out the times to do so. I like the idea of staying later. My only hesitation is that the cabinet is always here. And they've been working since, some of them, 7 a.m. in the morning. And then if we keep them here, they're here till 10, 11, and then they're back at work at 7 a.m. the next day. And so I just, trying to be cognizant and respectful of our cabinet's time as well. But we can flesh that out. But I would, in a perfect world, I would like us to do the agenda, to start it, to do our business, to take the comments from the people who wish to speak per each agenda item, stop once the meeting's over and we've voted, then we can go into comments for other topics. And then it's still 45 minutes tops, and then all the other rules apply. It's just at the end of the meeting, which gives people more time to speak. And I know other districts, and I've spoken to Dr. Vasquez about this, and I've said this from the dais several times. I know other districts give groups at the top of the meeting time to talk. It could be after recognitions. I would be even fine if it's at the top of the pre-agenda, but like the union and the Parent-Teacher Association, or even the student group, time to talk, even within the Board of Education, FADS usually gets to speak, like the superintendent, wherever they're meeting during that month, comes and speaks to the Board of Education, lets them know what's going on with the superintendents in the state. So just being able to give that time to those group of people, and we get that. I'm not married to just that group, but I think that at a minimum it should be those, just to give them like a couple of minutes to speak to the board. I would be in favor of too, if the rest of the board so desired. So those are my comments, and I'm going to shift it over to Dr. Castrodental.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You all keep mentioning so many great ideas. I like the idea of having CTA and OSPA and PTA give us updates or give us information or bring things to our attention at each meeting, reserving that time. Yeah, we can bargain that. Not bargaining. Okay. We can make it happen. Okay. And also, I've been in different meetings like Junior League when we had discussions. And if there was a controversial topic, instead of having people race to get speaker cards, they would, whatever the topic was, take a pro and then listen to a con, and then a pro and then a con. And that way, there isn't like this rush to go and take all the speaker cards so that one side isn't heard necessarily. It's a little more balanced. It's an idea. That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Castor-Dental. Member Salamanca, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things that make a lot of sense to me as well that were said. I think Member Gold mentioned it could be beneficial for folks that are coming in for comment to sit through some of the good stuff, like the recognitions, and one, it gives them more time to get here, and also for those that get here on time, they can just see some of the exciting good things happening in the district. I think that would be good for a lot of sometimes the angst that walks into first thing into this room before we get into any business. So I'm definitely supportive of that. I like the idea that was proposed. I remember maybe it was Member Gallo on maybe the times of the board meetings are different for throughout the month. One earlier, one later, so that folks can come and speak to at least one of those. Because I think we do hear from folks that, sometimes early works for some, but later works from others. And I do think it is harder for parents, students, and teachers to get here when it's too early. And so I'm definitely supportive of playing around with the times. I also would love to consider what does it look like to allocate time for some of the groups that were mentioned, CTA, PTA, and the administrators. Just an update and to see what's top of mind. Maybe they don't use it, and that's fine, but I think having that time allotted, because it can be difficult, I know for those groups as well, to always have a representative here on time and signing up for pre-agenda. So I don't love the idea that it's difficult for them to reach us. What's the other one on here? No, I'm open to playing with the 45 minutes to extend it further when there is a larger amount of speakers. So if we are in the 15 speaker plus category, so when we know we have 40, 45 speakers, what does it look like? Everyone to have 1 minute, but to get more people's voices in. It could be just the exception to when the room is really filled, that we look to go from 45 minutes to the full hour, perhaps, in the case when the room is packed, would be a proposal, but not as the standard 60 minutes, just like keep it 45, but if the room is packed, we have more than 15 speakers, we look into going to the 60 minutes. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Byrd, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I love the idea of doing recognitions in business first, because for all the reasons that have already been said. And I also think it allows members of the public who maybe come in really angry about something, gives them time to maybe cool off a little bit before they speak. But I love the idea of allowing them to see all the great things that do happen. And I think sometimes, as Member Gould said, that they just are not even aware of the amazing things that are happening in the school. So I love that idea. I also think that if we do move towards this, that moving non-agenda items to the end of the meeting is a great idea, because I would like to make sure that when we're doing our business, which is the whole purpose of our board meeting, that we're hearing from the comments that have to do with that business, and that doesn't get blurred. And then looking at what other districts do, it looks as though Volusia and Polk are the only ones that do that. They do their non-agenda comments come at the end of the meeting, but Seminole, Lake Broward, Osceola, and Broward have them combined, but I think it's a great idea to do it at the end. And the idea of exploring different times for board meetings, I know that was something that we brought up before too. I think there's like one other district that does that, but I do know some government, like the city of Apopka does that. One board meetings a month is at 7. Another one's at like 9 in the morning. And I mean, that's an idea. It does give people that work at night an opportunity to come. But I think my only concern with that is that we have all of our employees work during the day. So that would really shut out a huge group of people that really are interested in what we're doing here. So I have a little bit of concern with that. And I do like the idea of giving time at the beginning of the meeting for the groups. My only little bit of concern about putting that in policy is we have a great relationship with our leaders right now, but let's just say that at some point we don't, and they use that policy time to bring negative things every single board meeting, or bargaining issues every single board meeting, or just things that, and it's in policy that we have to give them that time. I'm a little concerned about that. I would rather it be maybe a practice that we start allowing that, maybe instead of putting it in policy. But that's just my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Byrd. Member Front.
I'm back. Okay. Okay, so I wonder, is there a way that we could do something where we split things up, where we can move some of our agenda items, or not agenda items, but just general work things that we're doing? Can we do that during the day, like at a 9 a.m. meeting? I mean, I don't know how we could work that. I know, like the city of Orlando or Orange County Municipal, they all do things during the morning. That would help also our staff who's here not have to be here late. Maybe that's something where we do that once a month, like we were saying. Or is there a way to do recognitions on a separate day where we do, I don't know how to even do that. I'm just throwing out ideas. But that way we can kind of keep our meetings a little more concise instead of making them from 4 till 10 o'clock at night. That's just a thought. Also, could we maybe give priority to people who haven't spoken yet? So I know sometimes we have like people who come every single week, which is fine, and we would love to hear from everybody. And if you want to come every week, you're more than welcome to do so. But somehow, and I don't know how we would do that. So, yeah, that's true. But I guess they could always just click. It's my first time speaking. Yeah, okay, I guess that's true. So somehow online, I don't know if there's like I don't know. IT has to, good luck with all this. I don't know how to do any of this. Okay, and also if we could notify people somehow, that's also, I guess, an IT issue with the times, and I know we're getting into that later, but if it goes from, if we start realizing, okay, yes, we're definitely going to be having to extend this, it's going to go to 1 minute, where we can let them know, or even if it's just a generalized email that goes out to them, like, thank you so much for signing up. Just a reminder, you could be bumped to 1 minute to allow for everyone to speak, have a speech ready. That's a 1 minute speech and a 3 minute, that way they feel prepared instead of getting up here and having to kind of wing it. And then I also agree that in agenda items and agenda comments need to be 100% separate. So there would be a public comment time where you can come and just speak, and then there's agenda comment time. And maybe that's how we could word it, something different, and instead of doing the public input and then public comment, which I agree is completely confusing. So maybe a public comment time is just for anybody, and then agenda comment would be separate. And We could all use a little spunk today.
Oh, thank you, Member Front. Member Gould.
Wow, what a great end. I like the idea of maybe breaking out the consent agenda items, to that earlier time frame. I wouldn't want it to be a completely separate time frame because I do a lot of work in the district and it would ping pong me back and forth if we do it at 9 in the morning and then have to be back here at 4 in the afternoon. So I would prefer to have it contiguous, but maybe a little separate so we could knock those things out. And it may be easier for those who also come to support consent agenda items not to have to sit until the end of a very long meeting for us to approve that consent agenda. I particularly think about our charter schools and some of our vendors who come in case there's going to be any questions, and they are here until way late just waiting for us to do consent. So I like that idea. I would just like it a little closer to the time of the meeting. I struggle with putting public comment at the end of the meeting because if there is something that we talk about, that makes people stay here very, very late. And then they get very, very frustrated with, our conversation. So I think where we put that public comment, maybe before we start talking about things ourselves, but I also don't want to take away from the time if we're getting into 10 o'clock hour of the things we need to talk about, because this is the only place for us to talk, right? So I think we have to balance the public's need to communicate, which they can communicate with any of us at any time that they want, just not collectively. It's a little more time certain. But I wouldn't want to take away from our discussion time in that way either. So it's a real time management issue on how we stack this to be kind and get people here but not keep them too late, because same with the teachers, they have to be back at school at 7, 6 or 8 in the morning. So if they're here till 10 at night and don't get home till 11 or 11:30, that's hard too. So I don't have an answer. We'll make staff try to figure it out. But I think there is a sweet spot in there somewhere if we can keep some things time certain and get them out of the way. And again, reinforcing the idea of bringing recognitions to the front and having those celebrations where we actually have an audience here. And that was something else that Member Front was talking about. I hate to take the recognitions away from our board meetings because then they don't have the spotlight on them. People don't watch those videos unless you're part of the family. I mean, it's just, we're not really spotlighting the excellence in our own programs then. So that would be my only concern. Thank you.
All righty. So Member Byrd, you're recognized. That's okay.
She just made me think if we limited the non-consent public comment back to 30 minutes and put it after our consent agenda, but before the end of the meeting, that might help because it's just 30 minutes. Yeah. And it wouldn't really extend the meeting all that much longer. And then if someone's here for a vote from the consent agenda, it gets done earlier. Just a thought.
Thank you, Member Byrd. I just want to remind board members that we're on page 2.
I know.
And we have 7 pages.
I know. Hopefully this will be kind
Member
of
Gould, you're recognized.
the hardest part. Thank you, Chair, and I'm sorry. So when we have a presentation, though, on a topic that we're going to be voting on, and then we have consent agenda speakers, that would still put non-consent agenda speakers possibly till 8 o'clock. So again, this is a huh?
It'd be easy for them to
get here after work. True, it would be easier for them to get here maybe after dinner and such, but you know, you don't know, because it could be, we're done in 2 minutes, or there's lengthy discussion and we don't know. Or there's a lot of speakers and they don't know that if they're coming for non-consent. They don't know if anybody cares about the topic, or if there's 50 people here that want to give comment on whatever that topic is. So again, it's kind of a conundrum, and maybe if it's flexible enough, we can adjust the schedule the night if we know we have a particularly contentious topic in presentation. So maybe we just leave that flexibility in there to be able to flip it within the policy at the consent of the board or something.
Thank you, Member Gold. I think without confusing the public, I wonder if there's a way to like pilot and see how it works within the public. If we could a pilot like a certain time, a certain thing, we could try it out for a few months for consistency's sake, see if it's working, see if it's not, and then switch it. I just don't know how that operates within policy.
You can always pilot something just to get an idea as to how it would work. You know, the thing is, how long is the pilot? I mean, if the pilot is indefinite, no, that's not a pilot. That's a de facto policy change. But if it's for, hey, for the next 6 meetings over the next 3 months, we're going to try it this month this way, the next month the next way, and then the third way in the third month. That way you could get a flavor of sort of different things, and that would be a legitimate pilot that you could do.
Okay. The challenge would be just how do we not confuse the public?
Right.
All right. So, Dr. Vasquez, you're recognized.
Just for the purpose of the pilot, let's remember that we're getting into the summer. So our board meeting schedules and topics during the summer are different. And so it may not give us a true picture. We may want to try looking at maybe 1 or 2 things instead of trying 3 different ones, and seeing if those 2 during the summer might work. But it may be a false pilot. I think you need to extend it through at least the first 2 months of the school year.
Excellent point. Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. All right, Mr. Palmerini, I believe that we are ready to move on to page 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right.
So now we're getting to the period where we have allotted times for speakers. And so what happens is, you all have been here, and we say because we have 27 speakers or 30 speakers, we're going to cut everybody down to 1 minute, and some members of the public get frustrated. Because of that, we wanted to put in the policy what would happen during this public input period. So if we have between 1 and 10 speakers, each person would get 3 minutes to speak. This is presuming, of course, it's a 30-minute period. If they're between 11 and 15 speakers, they would each get 2 minutes to speak. That, you know, if you have 15 speakers times 2, it's 30. And if there are more than 15 speakers, each speaker would be given 1 minute to speak. And then what we've done is we've borrowed the priority that we have for the public comment period and brought it up to the public input period during pre-agenda. So priority 1 would be reserved for parents, legal guardians, students, and employees. Priority 2, residents of Orange County. Priority 3, individuals who don't reside in Orange County. We once again reiterate that if there is a time limit on the public input, members of the public who wish to speak may not all have the opportunity to do so. Sometimes you just may get, 60 speakers and you are at 45 minutes and you're not going to get through them all. And so we wanted to make sure that members of the public know that there could be times when they aren't able to speak. Going down to page 3, this now talks about the public comment period, the period during the board meeting's regular agenda where you speak on items on the agenda. So again, any person or group desiring to address the board shall submit a written request through the electronic or written method designated by the superintendent. That gives the superintendent the flexibility to determine, is it going to be a card system, or are we going to have an electronic system? Or they may call into a telephone number provided in the public advertisement of the regularly scheduled school board meetings. Currently, we allow folks to call in for our agenda items. That would still allow you to have that flexibility. Persons may sign up to speak in the 15-minute period immediately prior to the advertised commencement of the regularly scheduled school board meeting. So how this would work, if the school board meeting is 4:45, they would have the ability to sign in between 4:30 and 4:45. Such request to speak shall contain the following: name, and I think we have a consensus that address is going to be city and zip code. So we will make that change. And the email address of the person making request, a notation as to whether the speaker is a parent or legal guardian, student, employee, resident of Orange County or non-resident, the organization or group represented, if any, the specific agenda item number to which the public comment pertains. And we have in there that the board may waive any of these requirements in this section by consensus. And then this is a first stab at this. This is obviously not an issue that we have any, we're not wedded to it in any ways, but we have had questions in the past on how many in-person speakers do we take before we take a caller on the phone. So what we did is we said, well, the order of speakers will be based on the order of issuance and subsequent submittal of completed speaker requests to the board clerk. The chair shall take 4 in-person speakers and then take the first caller, and shall then continue to take 4 in-person speakers for every caller until the callers are exhausted utilizing this method. So it gives priority to the people who come down to the chambers to actually speak to you, while still, and having it done in an organized way as to say, all right, when are we taking the next caller? Now the chair would know. We take 4 speakers, have a caller. Not wedded to the number of speakers in person to callers, but just wanted to give you something to address in that instance. And so,
John, could you go over the comments there in the corner there, especially that top comment?
so we have here about the 50, thank you, Amy, or Mrs. Enval, excuse me, sorry. So what happens is our staff, sometimes it is very, very rushed when we get these cards, when it goes right up to the period. So especially if we're going to prioritize based upon, are you a student, employee, or resident? So we can do this. It's something that we wanted to point out. So we can do things like, we can increase the 15-minute period to 20 minutes, 30 minutes. We can have it close 5 minutes prior to the commencement of the school board meeting to give staff the time to assimilate it, to say you have an issue. Well, it's a very contentious rezoning. I don't know of any other kind. And so you have 45 speakers, right? And, you have 20 of them who are not in the county that are coming to speak to it. It will give staff the time to go ahead and organize, okay, speaker 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 12 are all in county residents, their parents and students. They would go first, and then people who are not just residents of Orange County will then get prioritized next. So we could have staff go through that and have a little bit of extra time prior to the commencement of the meeting, because as you all know, staff is rushing those cards up to either Amy or myself when we're sitting over there, and then trying to, especially if we're going to have to prioritize, they're going to need a little bit more time to do it. So I think this is probably a good point to stop at the end of page 3 and ask if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Palmerini. Member Castrodental, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can't tell with the topics kind of overlap. So I'm just going to say what my notes are anyway. So as far as some of the confusion about public input, public hearing, what if we called the pre-agenda portion of comment the citizen comment, and then maybe the agenda item public hearing portion, so that it's defined better in just how we
So I
refer
would
to it?
suggest letting us play around with that a little bit, because a public hearing is a specific actual thing in the law. So i.e. we're having a public hearing on the final policy adoption, or we're having a public hearing on textbook adoption. That's different than comments on the regular agenda items, which aren't necessarily public hearings. I don't know why the law was set up this way. It just was. So that's a separate and distinct. I understand what I think we can try to, Amy and I can try, or Mrs. Enval and I can try to work through language that encompasses what I know you all are meaning, but I can't think of it right here on the fly. So but I think we can clarify it in a way that you're talking about.
Okay. And I'm not sure if it's coming up or if it's already been addressed, but the time period for the pre-agenda, right now it's 45 minutes, but we often we extend that. We don't always get back and start our next meeting on time. So I would be in favor of extending that to an hour and starting it 15 minutes later to allow for more people to attend who can't get here. Not that I want lots and lots more people. We have a lot of people. But I know that there are a lot of people who cannot make it because it's so early.
So let me just make sure I'm understanding. So start at 4:15 and go up to an hour possibly.
That's
Okay.
my thought. And then start the meeting at 5:30. That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Castro-Dental. Member Byrd?
I just want to ask about the electronic system that we're thinking about trying, or that we're going to try. How will that work with prioritizing? Will it be able to prioritize as they come in the time, but also if they are parent, student, teacher, whatever?
Yes, that's the. I'm not the IT person, but we've had Deborah and I have had a number of meetings with our IT folks, and it's kind of like a choose your own adventure. You have to pick one of those, and then those automatically populate into a database that says, it'll automatically tell you who is first. And you're assuming that the people who are signing up are telling you the truth as well.
Okay. So do we have a time frame as to how quickly this will be ready for us to start trying?
We have a sign of not immediate, but we have it's in the works. It's in the works, but they needed to come listen to see what you wanted, because we need to figure out, there's a lot of different things. Like if we're going to have the parameters of when you can sign in, when can you sign in? Is it 11 days before? Is it 5 days before? Is it 3 days before? Is it an hour before? Is it the same day? So all those things have to be worked on. So we're working on it. We have a good business plan, but as far as implementation, we kind of need to hear from you on what you want. I would imagine a couple weeks. More than that.
Okay. Well, because I'm just thinking that will solve the problem with the rushing that was talked about with the speaker cards and that whole thing with staff, because I still have concerns about limiting it to, like, let's say a cutoff of 30 minutes before the board meeting, because as we've said, I mean, I personally already feel concerned that some of our staff can't get here in time anyway. And then if we say, well, it's going to be cut off 30 minutes before the start of the meeting, that creates more of a problem. So that's why I'm thinking maybe that does not get that the policy doesn't get changed, obviously, until we try this electronic system and see how that plays into this. We could call it just agenda public comments, non-agenda public comments, or public input. I actually like public input better than public comments, because I feel like we're asking for their input more than we are their comments, their commentary on what we do. I don't know. I just think input's a better word, but that's just my 2 cents. And then I think if I had my choice, I would say a 5 o'clock start time, and piloting a one meeting starting at 5. And then if we want to do 30 or 45 minutes for non-agenda public comment period, that really only pushes us back that 30 or 45 minutes, because we already start our board meetings at 5. It would just be adding in that non-agenda public comment time in there. So that really wouldn't be such a strain on the staff any more than it is now, except for the 30 or 45 minutes for public comment, non-agenda public comment. So, thank you.
Thank you, Member Byrd. Member Front?
Okay. I don't know what everybody thinks about this. I know when we first talked about doing 1 minute, I lost my breath and thought, oh my goodness, 1 minute. But we've, I think, realized that you can really get a lot out in 1 minute. And I think if we're saying there's only 10 people here, let's give them 3 minutes. Personally, I feel like if they can get it all out in 1 minute, let's just say it's just 1 minute across the board, and then we either finish a little earlier or we have a lot of people and we go to the allotted time. So that's a thought. I don't know what everybody thinks about that. I think we do need to have a longer time to sign up. So the whole, once it hits, say we were to continue at 4, which I think we should not. I think we need to move it to a different time. But say it still starts at 4 and then it's just exactly at 4 o'clock. If they come at 4:30, which a lot of people have had this happen where they get here at 4:01 or 4:02 and they're not allowed to sign up, even if there's space available. So I do think there needs to be time, like whether we say until the last person is speaking, or I don't know how that would go, because that could maybe get chaotic. So something to think about. I do continue to say public comment has to happen, the input, whatever we're calling it. Because I also agree, Member Byrd. I think if we're coming, we have to have solutions and ideas. If you come and say, I think this is not okay, let's switch it to this, or you have a solution instead of just a complaining hour. But I think that still needs to happen during the meeting and not before. And then we say, are we going to continue with the consent agenda as is? And then we pause for a break and then we come back. Like, I think it gets like, what's going on? And most people that come, and me as a parent, when I first started coming, I thought, okay, well, that was the meeting. And then I didn't realize, like, oh, that's just like a pre-meeting, and now we're getting to the meeting. So I think it's true, if we could have people come in, you see how it starts, we have recognitions, then there's a public comment time, or we do all of our stuff, and right before our comment time, we'd let the public share their comments or input. And then in our electronic system, one idea I had, could we have the students put in their student ID? That might be... Oh, then it'd be public record.
No.
We wouldn't release.
Well, I'm just thinking so that we know that they're really a student. I mean, anybody can click, I'm a student, but if they put in their student ID, I don't know if that would make a difference, or...
I don't know what the confines of the system would be, but we regularly get requests for public records for all the public comment cards.
Okay.
Yellow and blue. So, I think if we're using the electronic system and we have them use their student ID, which is something we can explore, we would redact that portion of it.
Right. And I don't know if it's necessary or not. Like, yeah, if it's not necessary, we don't need to do it. I was just a thought to make it so maybe the system would say, oh, they're a student, and help with that. But yes, sunshine laws. Love it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Front. So I was queued up next. So in looking at this policy, I have a concern on the time limits on what, 1, 2, and 3, or 1, 2, and 3, because it almost appears as written we wouldn't be given a lot of flexibility if we wish to alter that. So say if we had 15 speakers, that's only 30 minutes. If we want to go to 45 minutes, we want to give the 15 speakers 2 minutes and maybe go to 60 minutes. Like, I just want to ensure that whatever we have in here gives us as a board flexibility to change it any way we want to. I like that it's in here so it lets people know that this could happen. Like, this is, if we have more than this and this and this is what is likely going to happen, so that they can prepare. But I just don't want it to hinder our ability to change it on the whim by consensus of the board if we choose to do so. Dr. Vasquez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to make sure we have a clear understanding of what we think we have consensus thus far. I know we still have some, but it appears that there's consensus to pilot not having a pre-agenda meeting. And it seems like we have consensus to start the meeting earlier than we currently start our board meeting. And it seems that we have consensus to have the public comment for non-board agenda items after we complete our business portion of the board meeting.
After we
Or recognitions.
consent agenda.
So is everybody concur with what Dr. Vasquez? Let's pause for a minute and let's
Right.
hear from the board to make sure we have consensus and we all understand what's going on. Member Gould, you're recognized first.
So it would be after recognitions and consent. And that consent period may need to be adjusted, and the board needs to have flexibility, because if we know there's a lot of people here to speak on a consent item that we're going to hear a presentation on and vote on, that we may need to just do recognitions, and then just because it could get very late. So I think there's yes, you were right, but I think we need to just be clear that it's recognitions and consent agenda.
Presentations are typically part of consent agenda.
Correct, but there's a lot of agendas we don't have any presentations, and
Right.
the consent agenda flies right through. But if we know, say we're going to take up the rezoning policy, that's a good one, and we're going to have a presentation on adding a 13th step to our 12-step program. I didn't say we should, I'm just using it as an example. Or we're going to eliminate a step, that would even be better. So that would get a lot of attention from the community, across the community. And we could end up with a lot of agenda item speakers that night. We may want to adjust the public speakers to before starting the consent agenda on that night. And the board should have the ability to adjust the schedule, knowing that we have 4 public speakers and 50 agenda item speakers. Does that make sense?
Right, it does make sense. My concern is our ability to notice folks. So if we're saying that they're going to be able to sign up,
Has to be consistent.
right, and so they may think I've got till, 5:30 or 6 o'clock to get here, and then we push it up. Now we have people who
But we
may-
wouldn't really push it up. We wouldn't push the time we start that up too much. It would actually fall back, if that makes sense. Oh, you're talking about the public speakers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my concern is with the, right, my concern is those individuals that believe they will have an opportunity to speak to non-agenda items, and we're saying that that would happen after
Recognitions.
after recognitions and consent items, but there are presentations that are considered consent agenda. So now, if you're going to push it up and say, oh, there's too many speakers on the revision of this policy, so we're going to take the consent item, the non-agenda items ahead of time, you may have people that think they would have had more time.
So would we have the ability to do both that night? So, I mean, I just think we have to be adaptable, right, to the circumstance of the night. So if we had people that were there and we decided to let the 4 people speak, do that item, and then you had others walk in that wanted to speak at the end, could the board make that decision that night to be able to do that? Because where I've had trouble for the last 10 years is we lock ourselves into our own policy, and it's frustrating for us and it's frustrating for them. So I know we can't make it too wishy-washy, but how do we always ensure that the board can adapt to the conditions of the night?
So I'm gonna defer to Deputy Counsel, but I do think consistency is very important when we're dealing with these public meetings, as opposed to that flexibility. I don't know how many times we've needed to have that adjustment, but I perceive that individuals will be more upset if they believe I'm going to have this opportunity to speak, and I'm thinking, okay, 5:30, 6 o'clock, I can get there, I have enough time, and then it's 5:15, we're going to bring them up, and now they don't have a chance to speak. So
I got you.
I understand.
Yeah,
But I believe the consistency piece, and again, the pilot may help us fine tune some of that with the timing.
Until we have an intense night, I think it's going to be tough to
And I'm going to recognize Mr. Pomeroy in a minute, but I also think that that's just the nature of the beast. I mean, we're going to have nights that are going to be busier, and then you just have to wait. If you really want to speak before the board, you're going to have to wait to speak for us. I mean, people have to do it all the time. So I just think that's the nature of the beast when you want to provide input to the board or to any public official. Mr. Pomerini.
I have one of those.
You
They
do?
just don't
Okay,
call
then.
us that. The superintendent's exactly right. I get especially nervous when it comes to public hearings. So example, our 3.01, 3.02, when we're doing policy revisions. Those folks have to, by law, have the ability to speak. And I would like to have some certainty for those folks when they are coming here to say, when is their sign-up time? Because they, under 286.0114, it's a meeting, I have to cite a statute, they have to have reasonable opportunity to speak to those things. So flexibility, I understand the desire for flexibility, but certain legally required things like allowing those folks to speak, we have to make sure that we give them some sort of time certain. Hey, if you sign up by this point in time, you will get to speak, or if you get here by this point in time, you will get to speak on an agenda item. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Pomerini. I just messed up the board, so I'm just letting those know. Someone had punched in as Vice Chair Gallo, and I thought I had
Yes.
gotten rid of that one.
No, Chair Jacobs is on the phone and she wants to be recognized. We didn't know who to chime her in as, so we
Oh,
signed
okay.
her up as Zoom.
Oh, wonderful. Chair Jacobs, you are going to be right after Member Byrd, so hang tight. But if I did, so here's my order. So if I missed you or I did something, please cue back in. I have Member Byrd, Chair Jacobs, then thank you, Member Front. All right. Member Byrd, you're recognized.
Thank you. I was just going to kind of say what you said, that I think we have to remember that speaking to the board on non-agenda items is not anything that's in statute. It's not required by law. That is something that we do, a courtesy to the public. So, because these are our business meetings. So if they feel so strongly about something that they want to come to a meeting to share it with us, as opposed to sending us an email, which they are welcome to do at any time, then I think asking them to sit through a board meeting or the business of our board meeting is not too much to ask of them. And for us doing that courtesy to hear what they have to say. And I also think that it's not unreasonable. I mean, and I'm sure Chair Jacobs can attest to this, Orange County government meetings sometimes are all day long until starting at 9 a.m. till late at night. And there's people that have to camp out in that boardroom all day long. So I don't think it's anything that's out of, extraordinary to ask them to have to sit through the board meeting. And I also just thought for a second about having them hear the presentations from staff about, especially like our legal, when they talk about things we have to go through legally to get things done. I think all of that is just so valuable for many of our speakers to be able to hear. And then the only other comment was starting the meetings earlier. I don't really have consensus on that. I don't know that we have consensus on that because a few of us had said we were concerned about starting the meeting earlier. I think if we did start it earlier, I mean, I might be okay with 4:30 just since all of our schools are at least released by 4:30, but that still doesn't give our middle school staff any time to get here. So I would want to make sure that we do allow that time to be open later for them to sign up if we do start it earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Byrd. Dr. Vasquez.
I wanted to clarify, I believe it was either Board Member Byrd or Board Member Gallo that suggested we start the meeting at 5 o'clock. And so that's what I meant by, sorry, 5 o'clock, not 4:45.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, Chair Jacobs, you are recognized.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
Great. So listening to this, I have some thoughts about how it would actually play out. I see the value of having the public sit through the recognitions before they speak. And, a lot of y'all have made that comment. that there be a lot of value to them in seeing all the positive things that are going on. However, when I slow down and think through how that plays out with our actual meetings, so we have our recognitions, and then theoretically we would take somewhere between 45 and an hour's worth of public testimony that would come either after recognitions or right before the consent agenda or right after the consent agenda. All those ideas are out there. I think we need to remember that we have strategic plan updates, not every meeting, but probably every third or fourth meeting. And those can often be long, tedious, and probably not of great value to the public to listen to. So I would want to consider whether we're putting general public input before or after that. But regardless of where we put it, if we put it before we get to the substance of the meetings, and if we're not going to televise the public comment, I don't know where everybody is on that subject, if we're not going to televise it, then that means that we're going to have an hour of blank time between the recognitions and the actual meeting, in which case I think the general public who might queue up to watch our meeting will probably start to learn to skip an hour after the recognitions. So I'd just be mindful of that. If we are going to televise public input, I have a whole different set of concerns that we need to be aware of the fact that things get said that aren't true, that haven't been, and board members that have been on the board for a while certainly know there have been a lot of times where we've had people either call in or come in and make accusations about staff not calling them back, only to be shown afterwards dozens of emails and correspondence back and forth. So I really hate for us to give a public forum to misinformation and information that reflects poorly upon staff members who are doing a stellar job. That's not always the case, but it does happen. So I'm still in favor of not televising it, but if we're not going to televise it, but we're going to mix it in somehow in the middle of our meeting instead of before the meeting, I think that's problematic. And if we're going to tell them to wait till the very end of the meeting, which, just for the record, we never did that in Orange County. We always took the open public input at the beginning. If we do it at the end and you're going to tell, you have a large turnout, and you're going to tell people that we're going to limit it to an hour, and say it is something that has generated input nationwide, and I know that sounds crazy, but we've had emails that have come nationwide, and we get callers that call in and just stay on the line. The board could theoretically, yes, we say we're going to cut it off at 1 hour, but if you've got a room full of people and you don't have any business that has to happen next, I think it's very uncomfortable to say, all right, we're done, we're all going home now. Whereas when you limit it to an hour, knowing that you have a board meeting that follows it, it is logical to have a time limit. It is less logical to have a time limit at the end of your meeting. So for all those reasons, I still think that we should start our public comment before we start the meeting. Even though I was leaning towards the direction the board was going when I start thinking through the dynamics of interrupting the recognition and the board's business and the other people who have come to speak specifically to the agenda items, which is the only time they can communicate with us is right there during that meeting, and they're legally provided that opportunity. I think we need to prioritize this decision-making process around that input. And I'm all for, moving back to the time we start public input to a time the board's more comfortable. I'm fine with extending it, to an hour. But in final comment on this, I think that I aligned with Member Byrd or Member Gould that we really need to have a lot of flexibility in this policy. And we need to be able to pivot as we see what's working and not working. So we need a certain degree of specificity so people know when they're showing up, but exactly how long they're speaking, and the order in which we're taking people that are calling in versus people that are in person. A lot of this, I think we should allow the board, by vote of the board, to adjust those issues as we go through, I don't know, kind of like the pilot process, but just keep it open-ended and something that the board reevaluates every 2 or 3 months, but it isn't locked into a policy revision process. Over and out.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Were you on the line when Dr. Vasquez listed what she was looking for consensus on?
I was, and I'm not sure if I responded to all the issues. I think I heard kind of her last question, and that's where I thought, okay, I better cue in.
Okay.
Do you want to run through them with me real quick, and I'll tell you if I'm
Yes,
agreeing or not?
let's just do that. Dr. Vasquez?
Okay, so I'm trying to seek consensus, especially if we are moving towards a pilot. And so the first item that I thought we had consensus, I don't think we do now, was that we would pilot not having the pre-agenda meeting, that we would just have our general board meeting and incorporate the comments for non-agenda items into our regularly scheduled board meeting. But I believe in your comments, Chair, you are not, you don't want to move in that direction.
No, I don't. I heard the arguments for it. It made a lot of sense until I start thinking about what actually would happen during our meetings. If it's going to be the first thing we take up in the meeting, it would be possible to do that, but the people that are coming for a public hearing and are thinking that they have a reasonable predictability of the amount of time they're going to be there. If we have, let's say we start our meeting at 5 o'clock and we open our meeting, Pledge of Allegiance, we have our recognitions, and then we have a full hour's worth of speakers, one meeting. So that pushes back the public hearing by an hour beyond the normal time. But the next meeting, nobody shows up, or 2 people show up, and people that have gotten used to it's going to be an hour and a half with the recognitions and then the public comment, but the public comment comes an hour earlier. It means that people that are there for public hearings have an hour's worth of uncertain time that puts a requirement on them for them to get there and sit and listen for an hour of unrelated public input. And I don't think that that's being respectful of the people whose only time to speak to the board on something we're actually going to vote on that day is at that meeting. And so I just think that's a higher priority than the public input that we take, as I think Member Byrd said, as a courtesy. So that's the reason that I'm no longer comfortable with putting it in the middle of the meeting.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Can we pause right there? And then on this one item that Dr. Vasquez just brought up, can we get a consensus from the board on if you're interested in piloting a board meeting where the pre-agenda is included within the board meeting? If you are for that, can you just? With the recognition. With the recognitions?
After recognition.
After recognitions. Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Dr. Castor-Dental, Member Felder, are you guys in consensus?
Yes, we are.
All right, we have consensus to move forward on the first agenda. Let's take up the second one real quick.
The second one is changing the start time of the board meeting to 5 o'clock as opposed to 4:45. That would give a little bit of extra time for employees and students to get to our meeting.
Do we have consensus on the 5 o'clock start time? Chair Jacobs? Fine.
Yes,
Yes.
I agree with that. One question, member or vice or chair.
Yes.
On the pilot, I think that the superintendent had a very good point. When we say pilot, are we talking about one meeting? Are we talking about 10 meetings? If we're doing it during the summer, does that give us an accurate indication of how well that works? So my thinking is it should be piloted during the school year, and it ought to be piloted for enough meetings to really understand the ramifications.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Chair Jacobs. Dr. Vasquez?
So my recommendation would be, we can start it if we wanted to in July, since that would give us a little bit of time to work things out. And I would recommend that we would go through the first 9 weeks. At the end of the first 9 weeks, we could have discussions about whether we want to extend the pilot, make changes, or make it a permanent practice. And then that time of year, there's quite a lot of things going on. No rezonings, but we will have people coming with some of the new rules and statutes that have been implemented. So I think it will give us good feedback, especially with the process. We could also collect data as to how many speakers we have, and even attendance.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Chair Jacobs?
Yes, it does. And ideally, we can put in the policy that we're going to pilot, and the board will have the ability to approve or reject the pilot. And maybe that will keep us from having to come back and redo the whole policy.
Thank you. Dr. Vasquez?
So if I may, Chair Jacobs, I didn't think that we were going to put pilot into the policy, but we will, do what the board request. The third and last thing that I'm seeking consensus on is the amount of time we want to allocate to speakers on non-agenda items.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. So I think we had put out there 45 to 60 minutes. Is that understanding correct? So do we want to do 45 minutes or 60 minutes? I think 45 minutes. 45? 45, I do too. 45? 45, okay, we have, Chair Jacobs, are you fine with 45 minutes?
Yes.
Perfect, all right, so we have consensus on those three items. Mrs. Inval, you're recognized.
Clarification on whether you want to instill the priority as well. The priority of speakers, as in you would take our priority now is teachers,
Yes.
students,
Okay.
parents first, and then Orange County residents, and then non-Orange County residents.
I think we have consensus on that. Chair Jacobs?
Yes, and back to the 45 minutes, just to be clear, it's up to 45 minutes.
Yes.
And a maximum of 3 minutes per speaker still, correct?
Yes. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm up next. Just so real quick, and maybe this is further down in the policy, but it's always, when we talk about the time that we allow people to speak, I'm okay with the times that we have set forth. I do think 3 minutes sometimes is redundant, a little long during some of our pre-agenda, but I'm fine with keeping the 3 minutes. What I have a heartburn with is up to 3 minutes. What I have a heartburn with is only allowing employees or students 3 minutes when we have an issue with an employee or a student and they come to speak before the board. Because as a board, we're up here and we can speak as often as we want for 5 minutes each. The superintendent has the ability to speak as much as she wants, as does our legal staff. But that one person usually only has 3 minutes to address the board, and I just don't think that that's enough time for them to tell us what's going on and what they need to tell us. So I would recommend, and it's up to the board obviously, that we extend that time, and I'm open for suggestions, but I think we need a time limit obviously, but I think we should give them as much time as they need to tell the board what they feel the board needs to know. That's my opinion. So I just want to throw that out there for people to see what you think, but that's what I had on my list that I wanted to discuss. So So when we have, say, we have students who are appealing their discipline hearing, or we have an employee who is appealing their termination, just those two cases where we give them more time to speak than the allotted 3 minutes.
So,
Mike on honey, because Chair Jacobs can't hear you.
I'm sorry. So, is that what that's what my question is? When you said that they needed to, like, we have an opportunity to come back, 5 minutes or whatever, and they don't have the opportunity. Are you talking about the time they have to rebuttal?
Or the time that they have, so when they speak to the board, their first initial statement, when they come up to tell the board their side of the story, all they get is 3 minutes. They have 3 minutes and that's it. And that's not a lot of time when you're trying to explain a situation or a termination or a discipline. It's not enough time to tell the board your thoughts. And then the board usually does ask questions and we allow them to respond. But I feel like they should at least be given, 5 minutes? More time to tell the board their side of the story, that we may not need to ask as many questions if we heard more of their story. So that my suggestion would be just on those cases only to extend the time that they're allowed to speak before the board. Thoughts? Does anybody, Chair Jacobs, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. Chair, I am so glad you brought this up. Limited only to the discipline issues that you're talking about, I absolutely think that we need to expand the amount of time. I just, from a due process standpoint, it seems completely unfair to me that the person who, for employees, for instance, whose job's on the line, has far less opportunity to make their case to the board than our staff has to present the district side. So I think one option would be to have approximately the same amount of time for both sides to, put on their case. I know John's position on this, and I agree with him that we need to stick to the record that's been entered, but that includes not just the employee, but our staff needs to follow those same rules. We get to follow up and ask questions, but we get to follow up and ask questions of both sides. So I would fully agree with extending that amount of time. I don't know exactly what it would be, whether it's the same as whatever staff uses, but that can be uncertain, or if we just agree to a maximum amount of time for both sides ahead of time.
Thank you, Chair Jacobs. Mr. Pomerini.
So I can go back to experience that I had before on this. Before I came to the school board, I represented the employees in front of this board, and back in the day, I had 5 minutes to present a case initially. So that could be a starting point. And I think back when, prior to Chair Jacobs, we had Chair Sublette, he would give the employee time right before the board was going to vote on a termination up or down, if the employee had any final comments to give to the board before they took the vote. That could be a starting point for discussion there, 5 minutes initially, and then if there's any last words they have before the board votes, that's a possibility.
So we could give them 5 minutes to address the board and 5 minutes to respond or
It wasn't.
before we vote.
It wasn't five, he didn't give them a 5 minute period before, the Chair Sublette didn't give a 5 minute period, but just, he said, if you have any last words. And usually, board members would have asked questions at that point, so there was not a lot to go over in rebuttal, but like 1 or 2 minutes maybe for rebuttal at the end.
So thoughts on the 5 minutes? Does the board feel that that's long enough? Could we extend the time? Could the chair extend the time by consensus of the board past the 5 minutes?
Yeah, yes, yes.
So there's flexibility built. Are you good with that, Chair?
I'm reasonably good with it. I still think if I'm a parent or I am an employee, it is extremely beneficial for me to know ahead of time how much time I'm going to have. So if we say it's 5 minutes, but then the staff's presentation is 20, and then we decide on the fly that we're going to give them 15 minutes, are they going to use that time as effectively as if they knew ahead of time? So it's better than where we are now, but I'm not, again, sometimes the staff presentations are pretty long.
Yeah.
And maybe we could go back and look and see how long they typically are and come up with an amount of time that we think is fair in relationship to that.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Front? Our chair, or, yeah,
Yes.
member?
Whoever I am. So I definitely agree. I think we need to have something where we keep the order, but we also give them the time. So 5 minutes is fine. I had written down 3 minutes with a 3-minute rebuttal, but 5 minutes to speak. But I think if we keep that, 5 minutes is really a long time, because we've seen that 3 minutes, you can get a lot out. So in 5 minutes, I think you can really plead your case or share your story, especially if they know ahead of time you have 5 minutes and you get that concise and down to what you need. And then a 2 to 3 minute rebuttal at the end, I think would be plenty, where they feel like their voice has been heard, they've been able to say what they need to. I think that would be enough.
Thank you, Member Front. Are there any other thoughts, Dr. Vasquez?
So if we were looking at the same amount of time staff has as giving the same amount of time, the format that we are going to be using is different than what we've done in the past. It's going to contain much more information. We're going to go through all those steps, and you'll hear more about this at the discipline work session. Some of the changes that are coming as we've looked at the new rules, what's required by law. So that time element may not, 5 minutes may not be enough, because I know that just in looking at the basic presentation for discipline, that's going to take on average 10 to 15 minutes, because they're going to go through each of the steps.
I believe Member Front was referring to the employees or the students' time to speak to us, not the time. We're not putting a time limit on the staff speaking to us, just on the employee or the student speaking to us.
Right, but I understand, but the chair made mention
Yes.
that she felt that, not giving equal time when staff has more. So I just wanted to be transparent in that the times are probably going to be longer now because the format is changing.
So could we give up to 10 minutes, give them up to 10 minutes to begin with, since our presentation is going to be longer, and then give them time at the end for closing remarks? Would that be acceptable? Is that acceptable to the board? Up to 10 minutes. So they don't have to use it's up to, so they don't have to use the whole time. And they may come up on some people are going to speak in 3 minutes or 2 minutes, and some may take the entire 10.
Madam Vice Chair, I believe the chair wants to.
Madam Chair, you're recognized.
Thank you. Sorry to take so much time on this, but I want the board to bear in mind that before most of the employee discipline cases come to us, the staff has already briefed each of us individually, and then we get a full briefing during the meeting. So we are not always right. I'd certainly like to think that the district gets it right the majority of times, but I would support the 10 minutes, Vice Chair or Chair, and the rebuttal, but I think less than that is just not fair to the employee. And I guess the ability for us to engage in question and answer expands that amount of time. But just bear in mind, they don't get to brief us ahead of time. They don't have that access, and their time is limited, and our time is unlimited.
Excellent points. Thank you, Madam Chair. Does anybody else on the board wish? All right, so I think we have consensus on the 10 minutes, and we can we can play around with that, right?
Yes.
Because I understand the chair's point. We do get a lot of information up front, and even 10 minutes isn't a lot of time, because by the time it comes before us, y'all have spent countless hours on it, and the board alone individually have spent hours on it by the time we're briefed, and then, so I see that point. Okay. All right, so that is that. I'm going to go back in the regular order of what is queued up here on the board, and so I have Member Salamanca next.
My point was addressed, so no longer have to say anything. We're good. I'm good.
All right, I have Member Front. Were you queued up? You're good? Okay, thank you. People keep removing their names. Member Byrd.
I just wanted to address the chair's concern about putting the non-agenda input at the end of the meeting, and I completely understand that if we have a huge turnout for something that, if there's no other business to be done, that could create a scenario where we feel the need to let every speaker speak. So my suggestion would be to put the non-agenda comment period or input time after our consent, but before the non-consent and reports. That way we have it boxed in, and we have more business we have to do, but we've allowed people who came for public hearings, because she has a good point about that. If people are here for a public hearing, we definitely want that to be a consistent time. This is when those items are going to be addressed, and it's not reliant on how many speakers show up to speak about a certain topic that may have nothing to do with what the business we're working on. So I think getting the consent agenda and the business and the public hearings out of the way, and then allowing the public to speak on non-agenda items, but before the rest of the agenda that we have might be a good place to put it. And then as far as televising, I don't have an issue with televising. I know that everybody is concerned about giving people that public forum, but to be honest, when they get up here to speak about anything, even agenda items, we don't really know what's going to come out of their mouth. They could still speak about staff. I don't see every other school district televises their public comments. So I don't really understand the reasoning behind not doing it. I think that, I do understand the reason, but I think that it's not really valid, because they could get up and say anything anytime anyway. So I think that when people know, if they're watching this meeting and it's public input and people are getting up and speaking, that especially if it's a very heated topic, that every single thing that comes out of their mouth may not be extremely accurate all the time anyway. People are smart enough to figure that out. So I don't have a problem with keeping it televised.
Dr. Vasquez.
If we are not going to be responding to comments on agenda items that are not on the board agenda, I have a concern, because we have had many examples of individuals coming, speaking incorrect information. Our staff follows up with the board, but the public doesn't get that follow-up. And so some of the comments that have been made in the past were grossly incorrect, and we are just leaving that out there. When a comment is made at the board meeting on an item, we do respond to it. So that's my concern about televising if we're not able to respond.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. Member Felt, do we need to address the topic of televising? Do we need to take a consensus on that, or we just while we're on this topic? Okay, so I'm going to go to Member Felder first, and then I'll go down to Member Front. I just want to make sure we fleshed this policy out.
Thank you so much. And I'm sort of listening to Member Byrd, but I also am seriously considering the superintendent's concern about when we televise. But the thing of it is, we've had situations when it was televised and they were on the agenda and they said some disparaging things, and it was said anyway. And I'm just wondering, Mr. Palmerini, if we do as a board agree that it can be televised, since we do have policy about civility, right? We do have that. And the chair has the power, along with the board, to, if someone is being uncivilized, we have that power to silence them. And in a way, it may be good for it to be televised so they can understand. I know it'll seem like a circus and what have you, but we're living in some very trying times right now. So my concern also, I guess have a duplicity with this thing, because sometimes people come and the information is so erroneous, and we know it's not right. We know it. And it's like when the news comes on, you get 3 news, 4, 4:30, 5, 5:36. And some people watch at 4, it changes. Because I had a situation when I was at Carver, with Carver situation back in December of 2022. And they don't see the 6 o'clock news when they corrected themselves. But I think if we as a board agree this whole televised event, I think what we have in place, we have the chair, and we can stop it, if they become uncivilized in their comment or say things. But I think on so many instances, people can come and we may not even have any idea that they're gonna say what they say, and it could be, again, disparaging, and we're already on because we're in our agenda meeting. So my concern is that I will agree with the board consensus, but I kind of feel like if we do it, televise it, we do have the power to silence them, and we have the power to have them removed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Member Felder. Member Front.
My thought, I do think we need to just keep it. I think having it televised is just fine. It keeps it the transparency. People who are not able to come are able to watch. They can see what is being said. But I think, to Dr. Vasquez's point, is there a way that we could respond at maybe the end of the comment time, so we're not taking up the comment time, but at the end of it, it gives the staff a second to look into what is being said, and we can make a little comment or something like that at the end of the public comment, non-agenda. I hate all these terms. Something like that.
May I? So the problem is that staff doesn't know what they're going to say. And with some of the situations we've had, it's taken staff hours and days to research allegations that were blatantly lies. I hate to put it that way, but that's what they were. And the other issue is that once it's televised, it's out there. Staff that has been mentioned, schools that have been mentioned, departments that have been mentioned, and there's no way for us to clarify or to clear the record. I will go with the consensus of the board, but I know the impact those inaccurate comments have had on staff, school-based as well as district-based, and it is not good for morale. And it doesn't inform. It gives out misinformation. If it's accurate information, we don't have a problem with it. And that's why when we have agenda items and people are coming to the board, our staff is prepared because they know what they're going to speak to. But when they're coming to just give comments on non-agenda items, they're not prepared.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. Yes, Member Front.
Could we do something then at the next meeting Like when we find out that information, then it is said from the dais, this is what was said, and then whoever has made those comments are then given like a warning. If you are to come and make erroneous comments like that again, you will have a certain period of time where they're not able to come and speak. I mean, those are just thoughts that I have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Member Farrar. Member Gould?
I'm willing to pilot this. I'm going to start this very negative conversation with, I'm willing to pilot with recording the public comments. But here's the thing that we have at risk. We have had players in the past when it was recorded who put misinformation out there before, I'm going to put this in quotes, fake news and creating fake news became a thing. And almost everybody can edit video on their phones right now. And it spreads distrust when there's information out there. We, as a board, have been able to maintain the overall trust and confidence of our community because we have been able to keep order and not have meetings fall apart with misinformation in a broad way. Not that they don't happen in here, but we've been able to circle back and then talk among ourselves and say, nope, that wasn't real. That's not really what happened. Here's the documentation, so on and so forth. Going down that thread, we're going to have a half-penny sales tax referendum coming up. We're going to have a 1 mil renewal coming up. If the community loses faith in the operation of this board from things that are taken out of context, we're going to have what has happened across the political spectrum happen to OCPS, because we've seen it time and again, the reality of the work and what is out there in the media and social media stratosphere don't match. And I would even say some of that is true for what happened with the transportation tax recently, because there was not a solid group of legislators in the county dais that could come to consensus and a rational discussion. So I just caution that if we pilot this, that we really look at the risk that we could be putting Orange County Public Schools in the confidence of the public in the reality of how we really operate. Again, I'm in favor of piloting it for a time certain period, because it's come up over and over and over again as we've turned over the board and they haven't had this disruptive experience. And it's back then is nothing like what we see today in mismessaging and taking components of messages and reshaping them. And it's just a big concern of mine.
Thank you, Member Gould. My thoughts quickly. I see both sides. I see both sides of the argument, but we live in a day and age where everybody has their phones out and everybody's recording anyways. And so those things are still getting out on social media. They're still getting out on the web. And as Member Gould pointed out, they can edit the video to their liking, and we have no proof of what really is said because we don't record it. If we record it, then we have proof of what really happened at that meeting. By not recording it, I don't think we're stopping the misinformation from spreading. I think it's getting out there on social media, whether we like it or not, because everybody has their phones out and everybody's recording. So I have, how do we control the narrative? Well, one of the ways we control the narrative is that we have the video recording. We do respond. We do have the ability, I think, to mute, if people go off the rails, to mute to mute the mic if we tell them that they can't mention names, they continue to do so. So that's just my 2 cents. I'm kind of in the middle, but I just think everybody's got their phone out and they're recording it. And then I'll go to Pam, and then I'm going to go to Mrs.
Chair and myself.
Okay, and then yes, I'm writing them down.
So you make very good points, Chair, but the concern is that when that misinformation, even if they take that excerpt and they don't manipulate it, and we don't have the facts ready to share, there's not really a way to combat that misinformation from just getting spread. Because we don't rebut those things in the meeting. We don't necessarily have all the facts at our fingertips. I mean, I'm struggling with that right now with the rezoning, with things that were said that I did not have the facts to rebut, even though I knew they were not true, but I didn't have the data in front of me to be able to utilize it. That time, that moment is gone, and there's no way to spread it without talking to every single person individually that is asking me questions. So I hear what you're saying, and I agree that there is a lot of that, but I still worry that those snapshots of misinformation are going to have more power than the truth.
Thank you, Member Gould. Chair Jacobs.
Thank you. When we talk about piloting, it's going to sound arrogant, I'm sorry, but as the mayor of Orange County and as the county commissioner, I lived through piloting for 16 years, the better part of 16 years. And there is a different dynamic that goes on in the chambers very often when the meetings are televised. It encourages people who want to spread misinformation to recognize they have a broader audience. And we're using our resources to allow misinformation that undermines the trust in the school district. And I don't feel comfortable that that's our obligation. Yes, people can use it on social media, but I don't think that they should be using our resources. This is supposed to be the opportunity for them to give input to us, but it is not their forum to talk to the public. I'm hoping that the board members that have been on as long as I have can remember the times that happened almost every week. We would get lengthy emails from staff disputing with emails, copies of emails they sent us that proved that the testimony that we received was blatantly false. And as has been said, there's not enough time to research those statements on the fly. When we don't respond and correct them on the fly, there's no real opportunity to go back to that audience. Our tapes are out there and they're out forever. And the fact that we might correct it in another meeting doesn't change the fact that people may see the first meeting and not the second meeting. So one last comment on piloting. Once you create greater opportunity for public exposure on these issues, it is much harder to pull it back. So I would be extremely cautious about going down this path until the superintendent is able to provide everyone with some of the examples of things that were said at our meetings that were completely untrue. And the last thing, I do think trust is extremely important. We need to earn that trust but we need to protect it because the ability to keep up with overcrowding needs, the ability to keep up with the revenues that we generate from both our millage and our sales tax is compromised by us creating a forum for people to discredit falsely the district and our employees. Oh, and last comment, as chair, I think you all are over giving me way too much credit for being able to jump in and stop people from talking. We've seen how that worked. And we see, and I've seen at least, how negative the blowback is when we have to shut somebody down, remove them from the meeting, or have to take a recess. All of that does not reflect well on me and the board, but it is the only way to maintain order and the safety of the board and the publics in our meeting. But it always has negative consequences, and I am not even remotely confident that I can somehow figure out how to finesse this and not have it reflect badly on the board for shutting down the public if they're saying something. It's not just disparaging. We're talking about totally false statements. And it's happened before, and it will happen again. And I think it will happen with a greater frequency when the meetings are televised. End of comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and point well taken. All right, we're going to go to Amy Inval next.
That was essentially what I was going to say. You have to go back to the whole purpose of your public input period. It's not a forum for them to be on the news or on the television. It's a forum for them to come to you with an item that they think you need to be aware of. And if you think back to the times that we have our public input, a lot of times we're forgetting a lot of people are very upset with their student issues. And so if you televise it, you're also putting those students' information out there, which is protected by FERPA as well. I think, and if you were to pilot it, think about this too. What about those employees or students that would be affected by that pilot? How do you take that back if you're going to? And similar to what the chair says, once you open that forum, it's hard to remove it. So just be cautious about thinking about those things. Yes.
Thank you. I believe that Member Casardental wanted to voice her opinion to this. And Member Byrd, did you as well? Okay, perfect. You're right after Dr. Casardental.
It's all messed up. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have debated this in my own head so many times. I see both sides. I want to err on the side of transparency and access for the public. But what makes me want to pause is that it's not a statutorily required meeting. It's a time for us to all be at one place to hear people's comments. We don't have to respond. We don't have to take action. We are just listening and then seeing how that public comment time has evolved, I think has helped me land where I am now on this, that I do not think we need to live stream these forums, not just because of the misinformation or disinformation, but because of some of the hateful information that is shared. And I don't want to give any platform to that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Member Dr. Casardental. Member Byrd.
That's a good point. That kind of changed my mind a little bit. I just wanted to say that we often say perception is reality, and while all of the reasons that have been stated for not televising are very valid, the perception, though, that since we are one of the only school districts, it might be one of the only school districts that does not televise all their public comments, is that we're trying to hide what the public is saying about our school district. And that absolutely, I know, is not the case. and your reasons are valid. I'm just letting you know that that has always been what has been told to me. Why do you guys not televise the public comment period, the pre-agenda meeting? It doesn't make sense, So I'm just putting that out there, that it does not give a sense of transparency that we are open to it all. But I do understand your point. Things have gotten very hateful, and I don't like giving air to that. I would say, though, that I do think that remembering that if we're going to pilot this all in one time, if we put the non-agenda public comment period right before reports, the superintendent has the time to speak, the general counsel has time to speak, board members have a time to speak right after they speak, as opposed to now where it can be like 3 hours later, where some of us sometimes come back to what's said during pre-agenda and want to comment on it, and they're long gone. So I would encourage us to correct things when we know that they're wrong and to make comments. I think it's always been aggravating to me that we just sit here and let them speak, and sometimes things that are completely false and we know that they're false. And I realize sometimes we don't have all the data that we need, but there's a lot of times where things are said that we could easily rebuttal as soon as they're said or right after they're said. And I think that we absolutely should be doing that for the reason that has already been pointed out, that we need to make sure we're keeping our accurate information out there. It's a public government body. It's a public school system. They're public meetings. And I think in today's age, all the comments that are said during pre-agenda are ending up, like you said, already broadcast. Many of them are being live stream broadcast from phones. Many of them are getting much more views on those social media sites from the phones than our board meetings are getting from YouTube. So I don't think that that's really an accurate, description, to say that they're not getting access. I mean, it's very much in today's world, everything's getting broadcast. And so anyway, that's my 2 cents. I don't know. It's fine, though. I mean, obviously the board doesn't feel the same, but that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Byrd. Member Salamanca.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess I'll separate the two issues on live streaming. The employee disciplinary matters, which is pointed out in the policy as a question, why we don't live stream it. We historically haven't. I think staff, union have all said this is preferred as well. I feel strongly about that. I don't think we need to be streamlining that. And I think because there's so much back and forth and allegations and reputations, I'll just put it out there. I feel strongly about not live streaming any disciplinary issues and not changing that within the policy. The broader streaming of the public agenda is one that I think similar to Member Gallo, I'm a little bit in between. My initial reaction is, yes, all the other school districts stream a lot of their public comments, but a lot of the other school districts are also all over YouTube because of how disorganized, messy, and chaotic and dysfunctional it gets. And so I don't know if we want to be like that. I don't know if that's what I want to aspire to.
No.
I think there has been, I view it less as lack of transparency, but as us being more community oriented, because folks from our community can come here and be part of those discussions, and it's us, the board, and our community. We are not opening up ourselves to the court of public opinion and the entire national political stage and state stage. And I really worry about bringing the rest of the state and the rest of the national political conversation into our board. Once one video goes viral and it hits the rest of the country or the rest of the state, we have to respond. It puts us on the reactive and defensive side as a district. It takes away attention, and we know a lot of these issues that are being discussed, whether it's books or whether it's bathrooms, take our attention away from education, from math, from reading. And I feel very protective of that. And so I know how folks use social media to kind of push an agenda on every political side. So I don't think it's unique to any one side. And I also, I know folks will put it on their phones and it'll be online either way, but it's different to give an entire platform at the district level. So I get both sides, and I want folks to have transparency, and I think we do a great job at kind of within like 30 minutes sending out a newsletter. This is what happened at the school board meeting. This is what we voted on. This is what we talked about. Here are the pictures. But we control that message as a district, and I think that's a good thing. So yeah, I think the other observation I've had, and this happens at state levels, it happens at the national stage, is that elected officials change in their behavior as well when we are being live streamed. And it, the comments, the statements, when things are heated in a room, I think actually decreases the likelihood of collaboration. And of just being reasonable with each other, not saying this board in particular, but speaking for this board onward, and we don't know who's going to come on this board in future years. I do worry. So I lean on not, it's a hot take for the technology person,
Thank you.
but it is, thank you.
Member Front.
Okay, I'm going to stick with keeping it televised. I think it just creates the transparency. The biggest thing is during the meetings, many times we end up speaking at the end about things that were said during the pre-agenda meeting, and the community who's tuning in has no idea where we're coming from or why we're speaking about that. But if the comments, the public comment time was televised, they would be able to follow along and understand what's going on. And then as far as like the students and staff and trying to keep their, if they were to come and had something specific that they'd like to talk about, maybe that's something that we would need to say a disclaimer, like please be reminded this is being televised. If it's something personal or private that you would prefer not to have televised, please come see us privately and we'll have a staff member meet with you right now. Something like that, where they feel like they're being heard, but also not being, having their issues televised. I personally think that not televising does build distrust because it, like Member Byrd was saying, the community starts to question, why are we not showing that? Are we hiding something? Which I don't think anybody here is trying to hide anything. But when we don't show it, it makes people start to wonder, like, why are we seeing certain videos maybe circulating? Okay, well, when did that even happen? When did that take place? It just keeps it all in a concise little video. Everybody can go back and watch it. And I think if we're all doing our job and our schools are all pouring into our students the way that they should be and focusing on education, we won't have as many issues coming to during public comment. And then during the staff or student disciplinary issues, when we shut that video off, I think I had mentioned that at one point, where we could put a little disclaimer on the video portion so that the public understands this is why it's being tuned out. And then also, I think that any members of the public that are present during that time should be removed. At one of our staff ones it was a couple weeks ago, there was quite a few people here that were just here from the public, and it doesn't make sense of why we would shut it off for everyone in the public, but then if you're here, you're allowed to watch. So I think staff or student, I know we pull for student, but for staff as well, if we're gonna shut it off for the public outside, maybe you'd shut it off here. And Mr. Palmerini probably has some legal advice for that.
Yeah.
Mr. Palmerini.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with respect to students, you'll see this later on statutorily, the choice is that of the parent whether or not the disciplinary proceeding is open to the public. The presumption is it's closed. The parent can choose to have it open to the public in the viewing audience, but if they don't make that choice, it's closed to everybody. So somebody who doesn't have any reason to hear the student case, is not participating in it, needs to exit the chambers. There is no similar provision in law for employee disciplinary matters. So while we choose not to broadcast that, there is nothing in Chapter 286 that exempts employee disciplinary matters from being visible to the people in the chambers. We have just chosen not to broadcast that out as a district for years, but there's no legal impediment to broadcasting it, whereas there is with student cases.
Mr. Palmerini?
Yes, ma'am.
Would we be allowed to put that in policy if the board chose to do so, or would that be against sunshine by us not allowing people or not permitting people to be in the room when we're handling staff terminations?
I think that would be a violation of 286 if we
All right.
put it in policy.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Member
Yeah,
Front?
are you able to explain that maybe? It's because then, and why is it not, I mean, I get that people can, anybody then could sit in here and record. Is that something then that we need to state? If you're here present, you can't record? Because the same thing can happen. I guess I'm just wondering, because I had quite a few people ask me at one meeting, why is it blacked out? Are there people present that are not part of it? And how come they're allowed to, but the members of the public are not allowed to watch it?
Yeah, so there's the more specific statute, 1006.07, which says student disciplinary cases are closed to everybody unless the parent opens it, right? So I have a specific statute that deals with that. When you all meet, there is a presumption under Chapter 286 that your meeting is entirely visible to everybody in the public that comes into the dais. Now remember, 286 was written at a time when we didn't have YouTube and we didn't live stream these meetings, right? So there has been no subsequent legislation from the state that says, hey, local government entities have to live stream their meetings completely, right? There's nothing in there. We have chosen to do it as a district because it makes it more accessible and transparent to the public to see our meetings. But in the past, as a district, we have said, these employee topics are very, very sensitive. Sitting as the one who normally makes the arguments to you all, I'm making some sensitive arguments about things that employees have done and sometimes have done with respect to children, right? And if that turns out to, that can stain an employee, even if you all were to turn around and vote, hey, we're not terminating the employee, right? So we've always tried to err on the side of protecting the employee. So it's up to this board. You have a choice. You can choose not to broadcast employee meetings and student meetings. You can choose to broadcast employee meetings, but not student meetings. I wouldn't recommend ever broadcasting a student meeting given the age of the children that we deal with and given the statutory presumptions. Or you all could turn around and say tomorrow, we're not broadcasting our meetings at all on YouTube. If you want to actually see it, you can come here. That is perfectly permissibly legal. Now, it's not practical in today's day and age, but those are the decision points.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmerini. And Member Front, Member Gould.
No.
Hello. Okay. I retract my pilot idea. And here's why. And I appreciate Member Byrd's comments about the other boards, but those same board and board members have often said to me, I wish we could turn that off because it changes the dynamic of how we relate to each other. And it certainly has got us focused on other things than what we have. When somebody records themselves and puts it out on their social media, they're speaking in their echo chamber in most times, unless they are a highly visible public figure or author or celebrity. It's the echo chamber of their groups. It's not us imprinting misinformation as a large public entity. So that is a distinguishing factor for me. In the ideal world, I would like it all public, but the ideal world does not exist right now. The bulk of our pre-agenda items are not local issues. The bulk of our pre-agenda items since pre-pandemic have been about national sound bites that are invading into Florida. So it's not even half the time the reality of what's going on in our county and in our communities. So I do worry in this moment in time that we would be adding to the echo chambers of polarization instead of bringing people together. And I completely understand what Member Farran is saying about that concern for transparency, but I don't think enhancing polarizations and creating the echo chambers is the same as transparency in the work that we're doing, which is all televised. Our board decisions, these workshop meetings, all recorded, all accessible. That's the work part that we are obligated to be transparent on. Having a platform for people to come and tell us their concerns and us to address it, because we can bring it public, right? If there is something someone comes and talks about that is not televised, just as we do at the end of some meetings, and I know it sounds disconnected sometimes, and maybe we need to do a better job of explaining what we're responding to. But I think we can bring it forth and bring it public at any time that we want, and have it within a boundary of fact, which I think is a big differentiator than just turning on live stream and playing to an audience. So I wish that wasn't where we are, but I think even in our pre-agendas, we're seeing that. It's an echo chamber to reinforce a national message or something that was on the media, or it's not the reality of the work that we're doing or need to do and spend the time doing to improve our graduation rates and improve career pathing for our kids.
Thank you, Member Gould. Dr. Vasquez.
Thank you. I want to first clarify that we do record, we just don't televise pre-agenda. So we do go back often and listen to what was said so that we're able to address the issues and concerns. We have worked extremely hard as a team over the last several months to address the issue of culture and climate in our district. And I believe that a lot of what comes through in pre-agenda, not all, but a great deal of it, is very harmful to culture. It doesn't support the work that we do, and we are not able to counter it. We have opened up so many avenues of communication to our teachers, our employees, our community through thought exchange, through town hall meetings, through visits that we are making at the schools, working collaboratively with CTA and OSPA. And I believe we have started to change the climate in our district. We still have a long, long way to go. And there are a few things that we have control of. And if we continue to allow things that we do have control of to gnaw at that culture, to gnaw at employees, because sometimes those comments that are made are not accurate, I think we are then going backwards. It's very difficult in the field of education right now. It's extremely difficult in Florida.
And as our team works to support our teachers, our employees, our families, and our students, when they hear things that are not accurate, that are hurtful, that erases so much of what we have been trying to do. And I feel vehemently that we should not broadcast that information because we are not able to respond to it and put out accurate information. I concur with so many of the comments that, yes, they can be recorded, but it's not us giving them that platform. I do believe that if we do start to record, we are going to have more folks that come with personal agenda items that have very little to do with the work of our district and very much to do with continuing to divide our community. And so I strongly urge the the board to look at implementing the pilot that will have a start time of 5, beginning in July through the end of the first 9 weeks, allowing up to the 45 minutes for individuals to be able to speak, but to pause on airing the comments and the speakers addressing non-agenda items.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. And I'm going to go to Member Front in a second. I just want you to know I did, in listening to people talk, we do not have consensus to move forward with videotaping the pre-agenda. So I don't believe it will be, at this time it will not move forward, but Member Front?
I think if we aren't videoing, then the public comment input, we should word it all differently so that it's more clear. But then that needs to just happen at the beginning of before the meeting, because it is weird then to be watching a video and then there's 45 minutes of a black screen and people kind of tune out. So if we're not going to be videoing public comment time, we need to keep the public comment time then before the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Front. All right. Well, I have nobody else on that wishes to speak on this section. Dr. Vasquez, do you have what you need? Do you have consensus you need to move forward?
I do. We will put this in writing and we will send it out to the board, and then we will start to advertise that information. I'd like to be able to put that out starting in June so that the public is aware of the changes that are coming as a result of the pilot. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. Mr. Palmerini?
I just want to, since we have decided what we're doing to pilot this, is it necessary to go through the rest of this, or should we just hold off and see how the pilot goes? I have no problem going through the rest of the policy, but
And we do have another work session for this particular policy scheduled for June 13th. So we kind of need to know direction on how you want to go.
I think we're good for now. Is the board okay with this? Moving forward. Chair Jacobs?
She had to leave the meeting.
She did, okay.
12:39.
That's fine. Are we good? Stopping here and then bringing it back?
So we're going to finish this on June 13th, right?
Yeah, we have the main portions done. We've given Dr. Vasquez consensus on the 3 items that she asked us about. So we do have a path to move forward. We'll just be tackling the rest of this in June 13th. But I think what the consensus that we derived at today kind of muddles the rest of this anyways. It's not necessary to go through.
So no problem.
No pilot team.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. We're piloting. So on June 13th, we will flesh out and discuss exactly what's piloting so it's clear to the board and clear to the public.
All right.
Yes. All right. I think with no other business before us, this meeting,
Can I-
sorry, Mr.
No.
Palmerini?
no, I just wanted to make sure, the chair talked about her role, about what she can and can't shut down. I just want to be clear, quite frankly, unless it's personally abusive type stuff, people can get up there and say things that are inaccurate, but they have the right to petition the government to redress their grievances. So the thing that I want to make sure I leave everybody with the impression of is the chair can't shut down things that happen to be inaccurate. People have the right to come up there and make their statements. If it starts to get personally abusive, then yes, under the law, the chair has the right to let that down. But I just wanted to make sure that it was clear for everybody here at the discussion. And with that, that's it from me.
Thank you. Yes, yes. Yeah. Member, or Mrs. Inval, do you have anything before we close out this session?
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.